So, welcome back, everyone. We're going to talk about the power of networking and why it is so important here in Ghana for a variety of reasons. I'll tell you a little bit about my networking story and how I met the Deputy Prime Minister of the UK within 6 months of me being here. Key people and stakeholders and senior officials in Ghana can be much more accessible than it is in the West and take a lot less time to access, but only if you are entering in the right mindset with the right components to make your networking a success in Ghana. So let's get straight into it. First of all, let's talk about how you need to structure your approach. I've got a little bit of a framework here. So the first step in this approach is to observe. Now, to observe, that is to watch the nature of the environment that you're about to enter in, which is Africa and Ghana. Understand where the challenges, let's identify where the challenges are, the pain points, and next you need to create some form of value to address those challenges and pain points, and then distribute that value through a variety of means. Now, one tip from me, you don't have to observe whilst being on the ground. You can have great observation by just looking at what's already available and outside, available on the internet in terms of news articles, etc. So, for example, Ghana Web as a website, watch Joy News articles, and you will automatically see where the systemic challenges emerge and how you can potentially create value. Identify as being able to select and prioritize what pain points you have identified through the observation. And you have to prioritize because you need to be thinking about people's willingness to pay. How painful is it actually, the challenge that you're trying to solve? And how easy is it to access the market? Creating value is something that has never been easier to do. You have a variety of AI coding tools, you can set up wait lists, you can partner with people to help build something, but you have to show at least what the concept would be. You don't necessarily even have to build the product itself. It's more around the concept of the pain point. And the next point is around distribute. So how do you get it out to people? And I'll go through a couple of tips of why Ghana is so different and how you do that. But you need to get it out. You need to be understanding what your market is, where do they sit, what tools do they use, how do they engage with the product or the service that you want, and then how do you get in front of people. I mean, Ghana and Africa is a little bit more traditional. You have the online tools that you can use, Google Trends, you can look at Reddit posts, all sorts of things. That's how I test a lot of my ideas, whether it be for here or outside. But there are a number of other ways you can test ideas that are relatively affordable comparative to the West. You can build relationships with people in TV stations, radio stations, go on there. We can go on podcasts, a number of different ways, but that's about the distribution. So you need to first observe. You can observe from a desk or you can observe on the ground. Then you need to identify and prioritize pain points. What is it that is so painful that people are willing to pay? And ideally, people that are willing to pay are people that have the income to pay it, businesses, etc. You to create value, you can do that really sharply and quickly in today's world using AI coding tools and things of that nature. Either way, whatever value you're creating, you probably need some digital front, a shop front for your business, or you can get on the ground and test some trading activities as well. And then you need to be able to distribute your idea, at least the concepts, test it amongst the market, see what the response is, refine it, etc. So this is what's really kind of critical from a business perspective. From a living perspective, it's a little bit different. And what I'd say is, in Ghana, your experience is largely going to be dictated by your access to networks, to different people. Some people say that your quality of a Ghanaian experience is dependent on the quality of your WhatsApp groups. And I can see that personally as well. Now, why do I say that? Now, your WhatsApp groups, and WhatsApp is a primary communication for a lot of different groups to understand where can I find even affordable housing, where can I find childcare, high quality childcare. A lot is done by referral and references when it comes to the Ghanaian system. If you ask any, if you're a diaspora or second generation Ghanaian, Sometimes your uncles and aunties would have had their house built by the same person. That's how important networks are in the system. And that in itself is an opportunity, because there are a lot of services that don't have an open marketplace to contrast and compare. And everything is really led by referral upon referral upon referral, which is actually evidence of a really good business, because if that just keeps getting referred on, then that works really well. I personally have seen businesses build from WhatsApp groups alone. It's a very popular method of communication. I'm a part of a lot of migration WhatsApp groups and a variety of real estate WhatsApp groups, but I wouldn't have got access to those WhatsApp groups if I didn't do step 1, 2, and 3 of this, which is observe, identify a pain point, and ultimately create value. Once creating value and getting it in front of certain individuals, like I used YouTube and what have you, I partnered with YouTubers. That's when my kind of world started to open up around distributing that value. So people welcomed me into WhatsApp groups, etc., which was I'm eternally thankful for. And then every time I had an update, I had a distribution pool which I could send messages out to, YouTube videos, those kind of things. So remember, you have to observe. You can do it from a desk abroad, right? You can observe individuals, Ghanaians, see what they talk about, go to Ghanaian events, those kind of things. I'll get onto that in a minute. Identify what challenges that are being faced in the particular country or arena. And even you could do it vice versa. You could identify challenges in the West that can be solved by African talent or African economies. People are doing that at the moment. Okay, creating the value, even if it's not building the full product, at least the concept around it before moving into distribution. Okay, so next, let's get into the core groups. So the first group I want to talk about, hopefully you can see this, is your peers. And why do we want to talk and network amongst your peers? Now, most people on this channel are of millennials, so I think kind of 30 to 44. And the reason why you want to speak to peers first is because you have shared goals. You are all looking for business opportunities or relocation opportunities or change of lifestyle centered around Ghana or Africa. As a result, you're all going to have varying levels of experience depending on where you are on the journey. And in an ideal world, you would have some peers who are a little bit further along in that journey that can tell you about the pitfalls, the watch outs, and all those kinds of things. And it's a really interesting cohort, especially around the millennials, because you sit perfectly between yesterday's Africa and tomorrow's Africa. So how do we do that? You can do it in DMs. LinkedIn is a really good one. And events. Events is going to be a critical one moving forward. You just need to reach out and say, for example, I've had people reach out in the comments and say, I have a suggestion or I have a question. How do I reach out to you? I drop my email, and that's how it can happen. You can take consultations with me or others who have experience in the system, because that's going to elevate your access really quickly without you necessarily having to jump on a plane, go to Ghana, etc. You can actually start doing some prep work from a desk before you even outlay any financial obligation, or at least if it is outlaid, it's going to be at a lower cost of picking up a flight, for example. So you can prepare that way. And when you can do that is any time in your journey. This is not time specific. And you could probably start with that first. So that's peers. The next group I want to talk about is the youth. And why? The why for the youth is ultimately they are on the ground and they have access to the tips and tricks, right? So they're on the ground and they got access to tips and tricks. How? With the youth, you have to be on the ground. So you have to, if I can write backwards, you have to visit, okay? You could also potentially reach out through institutions, which I'll come on to in a minute, that give access to the youth for you to understand what their pain points are. Because remember, the vast majority of the population is the young population. Young population may not have as much expendable income, but lo and behold, they will dominate the society in general anyway. So I think this is primarily through visiting. If you're parents already and you have kids, you can reach out to people who have moved to Ghana, have kids, to start understanding what their requirements are, what their needs are, what their pain points are. So the youth and the parents can be interchangeable in a way. And when to do it, that's again another anytime thing. Okay. And the third group I'm going to talk about is the elders. Now, why the elders? They're going to have lessons learned, the pain points around the system. How do you reach out to them? This has to be much more personable. This is something that you can do on the ground or outside of the country, especially where elders who have left the country, gone to the diaspora, you can understand their pain points, etc. So, you've got a variety of ways, less digitally enabled ways, but that is kind of through family events, unfortunately, funerals, weddings, those kind of things. If you're going to a Ghanaian wedding, and even if you're not from Ghana, you could speak to the elders around the table or just say, look, I'm interested in Ghana, I'm interested in Africa. What are the key things you need to watch out for? Okay. Now, why this group is so important is that the elders tend to be the group that has the, and it's natural as well. It's a common pattern that we see in the West as well. The elders, i.e. the boomers, the Gen X's, the ones that have probably accumulated the most wealth outside and inside the country. And they also have the best understanding of the inherent issues that plague the system that they have to circumvent and navigate. So have some tips and tricks and also have some network. Now, why the elders are really important is inherently they're going to be quite risk averse. They have ideas of Ghana naturally of the past and even the pain points of the present as they navigate the system. They may not be as attuned with the digital innovations that have come in, like payment services, TapSend, Lemfi, those kind of things. I'm not sponsored, but just letting you know. And so they probably do things in a more traditional way. So you could even target this group as a potential customer base because they would typically have the means to procure a service from you. And they probably would have the pain point, even if they don't realize it. But that pain point, it might not be strong enough for them want to change. But the reason why this group is so important is that you can't approach these guys until you've gone through that process of observing, identifying, and creating value. Because their inherent default position is why something might not work. So if you are able to create the value, that's a different story. They're having a different conversation. So this group is really critical, and I'll probably treat them last until you've actually created some idea or some value as to what you want to achieve in the system. So the elders you would really only contact once you establish or created that value. And the last group would be institutions. What do I mean by institutions? So that might be government departments of other countries, venture capital funds, research organizations, think tanks, etc. And institutions are really important because they are ultimately the administrators of the system. So they will help you understand what you need to do to get your objective that you're aiming for. So for example, fantastic institution here in Ghana is the UK High Commission, the British High Commission. They do events for diaspora returnees, etc. And then there's other representatives from other countries that do events that connect Africa to Europe and Europe to Africa and US to Africa, and even things like, I think it's less prevalent now, but US Aid, those kind of organizations that are looking for ways to fund or invest in opportunities, projects in Africa, because they all recognize the importance of Africa's future. Every single one of them, don't ever get that twisted. And why is because they are the administrators of the system and they can help provide potential funding or at least give you routes to fund it. So if you're on their agenda and on their radar, they will open up opportunities for it. Now, this doesn't have to be government institutions. This could be private institutions, event companies, etc. And I'll walk through an example of how that worked for me and how events events is the number one way to get to these kind of institutions. They attend these events, they represent at these events, they speak at these events, and you automatically get a direct one-to-one relationship. And when do you do it? Just like with the elders, once you've actually created or identified value that you could create, because you can test the idea with them. If they see a need, we often put you in touch with more people that can help push the distribution aspect of that need. Okay, so let's run Kuro through this framework and see how I went about achieving my goals with Kuro. So I came back and forth on holiday, I did a sabbatical here, etc., and all I did was observe for about 3 to 4 years, but over the period of time is almost 10. And the number one thing that I could observe and pain point I could observe was around real estate information and data. I wanted better insight to make more informed decisions around real estate. How could I compare areas? How could I predict the next head hotspot, etc.? So I used my skill set that I'd built over time to identify that problem and start to create that value. And creating the value, we now have Kuro to date, where you can go and make searches on particular property data to your specification and liking, and you can understand a little bit more about the market and how it sets that up. And then I distributed and I tested the idea with minimal upfront outlay. I did paid partnerships with YouTubers just to see if people would buy into the idea. Once I realized that people would be prepared to use the service, that's when I put more investment into building the product. But that was my first form of distribution. Then distribution took on another form later on and continued form later on. Okay. Now, what I also did for distribution was start to attend events. Now, events is probably my number one tip for boosting your network, both in the diaspora and on the ground in the continent. The reason being is because we have a big events culture, awards nights, events, conferences. And you'll find that all of the key players that you want to engage with across those groups, so your peers who have shared goals that are trying to add value, the youth who are looking for work, the elders who are probably in the positions of power and maybe members of the institution that are administering the system. Those are all critical people, okay? And what I did with Kuro, the first event I did in November of 2024 was Tech in Ghana. Now, Tech in Ghana, the organizers, I got introduced to them through creating value again, demonstrated to them quickly what Kuro was about, the benefit it had, and immediately they were interested. I got a spot to not only present, but also to exhibit at a booth at Tech in Ghana. Now, that was such a launch pad, so big thanks to those organizers of Project Want to Go. What happened there is, as I was presenting the solution, I was getting feedback from people in the system. I was engaging with players in the kind of staffing HR side, so I could potentially get additional, and in fact, I did get my marketing lead from networking in those environments. There were policymakers, there were NGOs, etc. And all of them were incentivized to come around to me. Now, it was a paid event, but the value was unbelievable. Media representatives, all sorts. And because the pain was so universally understood, it worked out extremely well for me. From there, that's where I got introduced to the High Commission. From the High Commission, that's where I got introduced to the Deputy Prime Minister. And that's not the only event. I've also done another event, which was the African Real Estate Conference Expo. I think that's what it's called, ARCE. Again, that was really focused on real estate. Again, I had an opportunity to exhibit, show the data, and the reception was really good. I got to meet senior ministers. They also understood it. And so then the network started to build extremely quickly. So bearing in mind, this is like 6 to 8 months, me being in Ghana. So events is critical. So let's run through those groups again and how we engage them. So your peers, you see where they are. You can see them on YouTube. You can see them on Instagram. You can see where they are, what they're doing. be brave, DM them, see what comes back. Okay. The youth, the one way, and this might be one of the critical ones, right? Between the youth and the elders. Because as I say, the youth understand the system and they know how to circumvent it. The best way to engage the youth is to offer them opportunity. There's a lot of youth that are looking for opportunities to showcase their talent. My whole team are Ghanaian-based Ghanaians, young guys and girls, and I've learnt so much from them about how the system works, the issues, the blockers, the challenges, and then as a result, they're even capable of building the solutions that solve these challenges. So the number one way to engage the youth is either navigate through an institution, but ultimately offer them some form of employment or project to work on to gain experience, etc. That's really important. The elders, critical group that are going to really stress test your idea against what they do and don't know is possible. And they're really critical because they are the private wealth holders. And then the institutions, you can engage them definitely through events and things of that nature. I met with a great startup called Blia yesterday, and they're at a fintech event today. And that is automatically opening their doors as they're pitching their idea to a lot of different players. So one thing I think the most critical part is to get into that observe mode and identifying pain points. To creating value is the conceptual creation of value is very easy nowadays. You can just drum up something in an AI tool. And then you're able to kind of start having the conversations. If I was to give a sneak tip in terms of accelerating your network, it's 100% physical in-person events here and abroad. They're going to be players from the system at these events who are looking to exchange value, get into those networks and circles. The other things that I would recommend is also getting into the whole WhatsApp groups and those things of that nature. That's going to be really important to your journey and benefit and exploration in Africa and Ghana. All right, guys, that's it for today. How else do you think you should be networking, whether sitting abroad or on the ground? Is there anything that I've missed? Please feel free to lay it down in the comments below. Okay, until next time, stay safe and stay informed.